So we move on to our sixth and the final session, taking forward this very interesting discussion to another very relevant and important topic in the present day. In the sixth session, our panelists will engage in a discussion on countering Islamic terrorism global perspective. The panel for the session is as follows. We have Shaida Mohammed Abdali, sir. He is the former ambassador of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan to the Republic of India. He served as a Deputy National Security Advisor and Special Assistant to the former President of Afghanistan. I extend my warm welcome to you, sir. Next up, we have Zafar Sareshwala, sir, Indian businessman and owner of Persoli Corporation. He is also the former Chancellor of Maulana Azad National Urdu University. He is a member of the strict Tablighi Jamaat branch of Islam. He was also one of the pioneers of Islamic finance and set up the first onshore Islamic equity fund. A very welcome to you, sir. Next up, we have Manish Shankar Sarma, sir. He is a senior officer of the Government of India and currently serves as Additional Director General of Police, Madhya Pradesh. He holds a Master in International Affairs and Public Policy from the University of California, specializing in international security and counterterrorism. His background incorporates a unique composition of service in the fields of law enforcement, counterterrorism, diplomacy, UN peacekeeping in Europe, and ensuring transportation security in India. Manish Shankar sir is one of the very few experts in India who combine extensively in national as well as international level experience, along with outstanding international acclaim in combination with academic and scholarly work. Next up, we have a very special guest, Professor Dr. Darko Trifunovic. He is a senior advisor in the Research Institute for European and American Studies based in Athens, Greece. He is a founder member and director of the Institute for National and International Security. Dr. Trifunovic was elected as guest professor at Fundan University, Center of American Studies, Shanghai, China. He is a specialist in security studies, intelligence and counterintelligence studies, as well as counterterrorism, national and international security studies. We welcome you, sir. Finally, we have Molly Edinburgh, ma'am. Molly ma'am is a research fellow at the International Center for the Study of Violent Extremism. She holds an MA in Forensic Psychology for the George Washington University and a BS in Psychology with a specialization in clinical psychology from San Diego. At ICSVE, she is working on coding data from qualitative interviews and developing trainings for use with the Breaking the ISIS Brand Counter Narrative Project videos. Ma'am has presented research at the International Summit on Violence, Abuse and Trauma at the San Diego Research Conference and many other such conferences. She is also a steering committee member of the Washington, D.C. chapter of Israel Policy Forum. Our sixth session will be once again moderated by Nabila ma'am. So without further delay, over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much for the introduction and appreciate all the guests joining us as well. I think we're mostly transcending into the same topic, more or less, on terrorism, especially Islamic terrorism. How do we counter Islamic terrorism, and that we see prevalent all across in the name of Islam, people unleashing terror, and that's rampant. Somehow we heard our guests in the previous session say that Muslims often defend, or not exactly defend, or rather I heard Noor who said that you defend the religion immediately saying that they're not Muslims, those terrorists are not Muslims. So is there a strategy and a way to actually come together and very strictly condemn terror and disassociate from them in a way that that you have the rest of the actual innocent, genuine Muslims united against terror? And that's visible. It's not just silent criticism or silent condemning. It actually becomes a larger, more growing voice so that people know what they're doing is not right. I'd like to start with our panelists there. Zafar Sareshwala, I'd like to start with you. If you could go right ahead about Islamic terror, which we see all across. I think you're on mute, sir.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Today is 26th November 2611, our own India's 9/11, and my homage to all, the brave soldiers and a lot of people, hundreds who laid their life. So we can't forget that. Now, having said that, fundamentally, we have to accept. I don't believe that, yes, Islam has a very firm view. Quran is very clear about these kind of atrocities, but we have to accept that whether people who killed in the Charles Hebdo or the people who came on 26/11/2008 or whatever is happening, they use Islam and they are Muslims. There's no doubt about it. You have to accept that. These are misguided people, very small portion. I mean, there are 1.8 billion Muslims in the country, in the world. But even 10,000, which is a very small proportion, but if they have this view or this idea, then now the time is. In fact, I've been saying this ever since things started happening in France, that now the silent majority within the Muslim community who say that yes, this is not Islam or this is against the basic principles of Islam. Oh, now the time for condemnation is finished. Condemnation will not work. These people like me, there are several, there's a large section, they need to come out and confront such people who have hijacked Islam. So we cannot allow them to hijack the religion of Islam. And why this has happened? I mean, let's go little backward. I mean, this kind of ideology was totally unknown to us in India till 1995. Yes, till I didn't go to England, I did not know that people with this ideology exist. And this existence was in West. I mean, there were people like Hizbul Mujahideen or Hizbut Tahrir, Umar Bakris of the world I came across in England. There were people who had come from Algeria. So this whole ideology, this extreme ideology, it was alien to people like me. I mean, till 95, I didn't go to England. I didn't know that such people exist. Now, after traveling between United States, England, and several parts of France, I got the opportunity to travel to Paris, to Belgium. I got to know that there is a section within the Muslim community who have this ideology. Now, the extreme right wing and the ISIS of the world and the Al-Qaeda of the world, they quote the same Quranic verses. Now, it is the time of the Islamic scholars, because see, you cannot lift an ayat of Quran, a small passage of Quran, and quote it out of context. There are 6 or 7 verses of Quran which people intermittently quote, and this is done by the ISIS of the world, by the Al-Qaeda of the world, and the right wings of the world. Now these were abrogated. So Quran has to be studied in context, but now it is the duty of people like us or the Islamic clerics to confront them. And this ideology emanated about 150, 200 years back from Saudi Arabia. The Wahhabi movement, till before that, nobody in the world knew about it. So I think now is the time to confront and to remove these kind of people within the community. And it is the duty of, now I feel it is about parenting, because with the influx of the social media, the internet, people see whatever is there is a huge traffic of Islam or the Islamic ideology moving around on the internet, which is not controlled by anybody. So it is the duty of the parents, particularly the Muslim parents, to identify this and to teach their children at the age of 13 or 14 what true Islam is, what is wrong, what wrong is happening, and what wrong is being propagated. So I think now the time has come to accept, because till we don't accept, till I don't accept that I have got some disease, I will not work anything towards the curing of it. So we need to accept, yes, there are elements within the Muslims, within the Muslim community who have this, who harbor this ideology. They misinterpret Quran. So now we need to identify and we need to confront. This, I think, should be the beginning.
Right. Let me cut across to Shaida Abdali. Are you with us? Shaida Abdali, can you hear me?
Ma'am, do you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yes. Good evening, ma'am. I'm sorry for being delayed because I was thinking earlier that we were supposed to be online at 8:30 and just came to know that the session started at 8:15. So I'm sorry for the delay.
That's fine. Shaida, if you can give your take on Islamic terrorism that prevails in the name of religion, you're looking at terror that prevails. We heard what Sir had to say earlier. Do you believe that somehow Muslims per se across the world having a different, now, first of all, Muslims haven't wholeheartedly, even though they have condemned terror, they haven't wholeheartedly come together in forces to condemn it. Do you think it's because there is some sort of guilt or apprehension because there are some verses in the Quran that could be misleading? There is room for misinterpretation, and that's why Muslims somehow hesitant about largely condemning it, because then you're probably speaking against the Quran, the book itself. So there isn't a unifying voice, and why is there?
Well,
why isn't there?
Well, thank you very much, ma'am. In the outset, I commend for the GCTC for this very timely get together. It's a very important subject that you just raised about terrorism when it is linked to a particular religion. I think the major problem right now is globally the lack of common definition for terrorism. I think calling Islamic terrorism or any other religious terrorism is a major mistake on the part of the global community, including our region, that we are linking a religion, because religion does not, no religion justify terrorism the way we've been seeing, particularly in our religion. So far, I think Islam has been harmed the most among all religions at the hands of terrorists. Then why would we call it Islamic terrorism? I think this needs to be corrected globally, that we should not link any religion to the type of terrorism or any terrorism that we've been seeing all along. Therefore, I think it has nothing to do with terrorism, with religion. Terrorism that we've been seeing is politically motivated by particularly certain actors in our region, even state sponsorship of terrorism that we see. Then why would we link it to a religion? Therefore, we have to find a political solution to this problem so that we save religion and we also protect the people who are basically harassed by hearing religion, that the people believe so much in it while being linked to that particular religion. So we need to fix this problem in the outset. So if you want me to go further on to the nature of terrorism in our region, I'll go. Otherwise, I'll stick to this issue of terrorism being linked to religion, which has to be fixed sooner rather than later, because we see a lot of opposition, especially by the Muslim countries, by the scholars of Islam, that why would we call terrorism linked to a particular religion, especially to Islam?
Right. In fact, the speakers earlier also spoke about how Islamic terrorism here is basically a political tool for many governments to flare the violence. But isn't it time that we stop playing the victim card? That this is politically motivated, time and again call this politically motivated, because at the end of it, it's in the name of religion that terror is unleashed. Why isn't there same political motivation probably, or rather Christian terrorism or Hindu terrorism, which still exists in small pockets, but isn't as much in number and magnitude as Islamic terror. Is this only politically motivated? Is there nothing wrong with the religion per se in terms of maybe what our Islamic clerics are propagating in at several places? As much as we want to condemn them, we're scared to raise our voice vehemently, because then we'd probably be going against the tenets of Islam itself.
Excellency Dali, you're on mute.
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Do you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
So in fact, this is a major issue. I think religion has been a tool, but not the motivation, not the driver. There is a difference between a tool and calling it as a driver or motivation. A religion for the last many decades has been used. You have example of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. The most effective tool against the Soviet invasion in Afghanistan was religion, but that was justified because we were fighting against an aggression, an invasion of Afghanistan by a Soviet Union. But later on, the tool that was used for a justified war used for other political objectives, and that continues to be the case. That is the major problem in our region. You see, you may be seeing a freedom fighter using religion for a justified war elsewhere in the world, but it varies from region to region. Especially in our region, if we speak of terrorism, this is purely a state-run, phenomena, which is used for political aims, and Islam used as a tool. Therefore, unfortunately, this is an insult, posed to a religion that never justified violence, in the entire history of the religion. Islam has been the most peaceful in nature, but those who are twisting it, those who are distorting it in the form of a tool, that is something that we have to go against, and we should find those actors, those individuals, or those agencies which are using a religion as a tool for their nefarious activities.
Right. Let me, Molly, are you with us? Molly Ellenberg?
Yes, hi.
Hi, Molly. Do take over. I mean, this Islamist or Islamic terror has always been told to be politically motivated. It's a political tool. But do you think it's about time for some introspection that the religion and the people who follow the religion so ardently must really indulge in? It's about time to act and less to defend.
I don't think that. I think that seems to be certainly a lot of focus, but as Dr. Specker mentioned in the previous section, and as the other speakers have said as well, Islam is not the only biblical or the only religion with scriptures that justify actions in times of war that people misuse, that are super long, difficult texts that scholars need to interpret. And so to say that, just because it's able to be misused, that it needs to be changed, is to really kind of ask people to water down their religion to get rid of things that could be misinterpreted, instead of trying to promote what the real interpretation is, what the real meaning is behind all of the scriptures, and trying to teach that to people, as opposed to saying, okay, we'll just, change it because some people don't understand it.
All right. I mean, it's not about changing what the religion says, because Islam is a beautiful religion, but it's about strengthening the actual the actual belief of the religion itself. Why is there so much room for misinterpretation? Is something that we don't get. As much as you condemn it, there isn't enough. There aren't enough voices coming out in large numbers to condemn terror, and that's what makes it. That's what makes it that weakling. Do you feel that there must be a strategy in place to come out and stop the kind of brainwashing that happens rampantly now with the age of social media and the age of the internet? It becomes a lot more easier for extremist groups or terror groups, organizations to reach out to those vulnerable just with the click of a button, sitting in a remote corner. They have a larger audience and better access. What could be a strategy and where could be a start?
Yeah, so that's what we at the International Center for the Study of Violent Extremism have been doing with our project Breaking the ISIS Brand, because there is certainly a need to be reaching people broadly on the internet, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Telegram, other encrypted platforms. And we use counter-narrative videos of real ISIS members, prisoners, defectors, returnees, talking about their experiences and talking honestly about why they joined. Because so often in trying to condemn terrorism, or in which obviously, you know, everyone should be condemning terrorism, but we try to say there's no reason for this, they should be appreciating the values of a liberal society, instead of recognizing what are the grievances that are pushing people to this, what are the political reasons, what are the economic reasons, what are the reasons that people are willing to misinterpret their religion, what are the reasons that people who do twist the religion are able to recruit so many people. And so to be able to point that out, to be able to point out the lies that and the misinterpretations, what we do in our counter narratives, but you also have to provide another action path. You can't just say, this is wrong, go back to your life before, if your life before was terrible. So there needs to be these other actions, and we have a website called therealjihad.org where people can go to find blog posts and videos and resources, and soon enough, hopefully, you know, a live feature where people can talk to someone who's an expert and ask questions, because as you've said, there's a lot of room for misinterpretation. And so if people have someone that they can ask and say, you know, this is what I've been told by somebody else, and it seems like a really good way to fix my life, then to have somebody who can tell them, no, that's wrong, that's not Islamic, but here's what is, and here's how you can be a hero, here's how you can stand up for your community, here's how you can promote positive change. That's what's going to be really helpful. But we can't just say, you know, this misinterpretation is wrong, that's it.
True. True. Do we have Mr. Manish Shankar Sharma, IPS, Additional Director General of Police, Madhya Pradesh, joining us as well?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Manish Shankar, can you? Right. Mr. Manish Shankar, speaking of Islamic extremism there and the youth being so easily brainwashed, what in your experience so far what have you really come across which really is the root of the problem in terms of the youth? What are they really lured with, and how do they become so, you know, how do they actually subscribe to that theory of extremism? Because it's so easy not to, but somehow there are large numbers who do. Do you think it's the company that they keep, or the influence, the kind of influence that they have from their own community members, which is good enough to brainwash them? It does not literally mean a Jaish-e-Mohammed or someone from Taliban sitting somewhere remotely. It's probably someone right in your neighborhood trying to sort of condition you in a way that if you're Muslim, you shouldn't be doing that. So it's a larger narrative. It's not just about a terror group per se.
Absolutely so. At the outset, please allow me to, number one, pay homage to the martyrs and to the people who lost lives several years ago on this date in one of the biggest terror attacks that India has faced. On a positive note, I would also like to congratulate the GCTC, Mr. Tikku, and all its members on the beginning that they have made today in terms of signing the MOU with a European think tank. So that platform, which has now emerged as one of the truly national platforms, is going global. Having said that, your question. So there is this entire gamut of ideas, reasons, situations that are responsible for the youth following in the line that we see globally across the Europe, France, US, India, everywhere. Over my experience, what I have seen primarily is that what happens is, and this is something that I have noticed in the last 10, 15 years, even as chief of police working in India and working abroad with the UN and with the UN in Yugoslavia, ex-Yugoslavia, where there were 3 different communities. What we have seen is that the Shanti Samiti meetings that we used to hold as chiefs of police in India in various districts, gradually the elders, the sway that the elders of the community had on the youngsters of the community was disappearing slowly and slowly. And over the years, one has noticed that there are now times when either these peace committee meetings will not see youngsters, even though a lot of effort is made by the local collector and SP to call them. If at all they are there, they will not be following those decisions that have been taken in that. So there is this movement of youth away. One reason of that is the loss of control that the elders of the community have. Also, indoctrination, ideological indoctrination per se, that has been taking place across the world, physically as well as on the social media, making use of technology. ISIS was an expert in that. Other groups, lone wolves, everyone is making use of technology in terms of the indoctrination that is taking place. Now, what is happening is there is not proper efforts in terms of counter narratives. You see, if you are only told that religion makes this necessary, if it is told 100 or 200 or 1,000 times, it starts to appear to be the case to young, impressionable minds. However, if we see a lot of counter narrative efforts by the government, successive governments everywhere, through making the same use of technology, through also involving community leaders, this is something that has probably been missing across. We need to talk to community leaders as well, and young leaders, those who have sway over the large majority of population that is affected by this ideological. So, there is this huge gamut of reasons. Once given an opportunity, I would like to take this to the global perspective also and open up 3-4 things that I feel are important. Going ahead, what's happening is that wars, as we have seen them in the past, they are not going to be as many wars, and primarily the governments will have to deal with non-state actors, whether individuals or organizations. We see a global perspective emerging in the last 5-7 years, where these kind of non-state actors are taking primacy in terms of events, incidents, and attacks. Also, one other point that I want to bring in is any kind of counter radicalization efforts or counter terrorism efforts by any country. You would have seen that sitting in India, we sometimes say that the US should do this, or X or Y or Z country should do this. But what is increasingly happening and has happened in the past, whether it was 1979 Afghanistan or Iran, US, France, any country in the past has, and currently also, and in the future will be seeing what is their national interest, geopolitically, what is important for them, and taking decisions. Now, this could either encourage radicalization and terrorism. It also has the capacity to constrain and reduce terrorism. So there's a number of issues.
Right. Thanks very much, Mr. Manish. Let me quickly cut across to Darko Trifunovic. Professor, you wanted to speak. Please do jump in. Your views on this global terror, especially in the name of Islam, religious extremism that we see here. How do you think this can be curtailed in the age of internet and social media? Professor Darko, can you hear me? Mr. Darko, can you hear us?
Darko, you are on mute. Kindly unmute your mic, please. Professor Darko, please unmute your mic.
Professor Darko, can you hear us? All right, I'm going to switch back to Molly then. Molly, you wanted to make a presentation. Go right ahead. I know that you've been wanting to. Please do. Please go ahead. You've surveyed all across. What have you found? Yeah.
Slide seem, you know what, the slides are a little finicky, so I'll go without the slides, but thank you very much. I'm very happy to be able to present this counter-narrative because, as was just mentioned, there is a dearth of counter-narrative messaging, and that's really, really important. And
can you forward the link? Can you forward us the link?
It's a PowerPoint.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to send you the slides after, though, if I can. Yeah. Sure. But basically what has happened in previous counter-narrative efforts that have kind of led to a lot of challenges are that they come from untrustworthy sources. So if you're somebody who's vulnerable to radicalization, you're not somebody who trusts the government. So a message that comes from your government, or even worse, from an intelligence agency, or seems like it comes from an intelligence agency, that's not something that you trust. And that feeds right into the government is watching you, they're at war with you, they're against you, they're discriminating against you. And then there are also, problems with alternative messaging, as I mentioned before, that promote the values of a democratic society that haven't necessarily been beneficial to the person who's watching. And then the third kind of fallacy in counter-narratives has been the use of logical and cognitive arguments of, here's why this is illegal, here's what's going to happen to you. Because terrorists don't use logical arguments to recruit people, they use emotional arguments. They use super strong, emotionally salient messaging, and that's what counter-narratives need to do as well. So we address all of those problems by first, using a speaker who's credible and relatable. These are speakers who are ISIS defectors, prisoners, returnees, and we found that the most credible speakers are those who show their face, who use their real name, who are speaking into the camera, telling their stories emotionally. They explain what the real legitimate grievances are that drive people to join terrorist groups. And they also use emotionally evocative narratives to get their message across. And what we do is we have partnered with a marketing consultant, but we work with Facebook to disseminate these counter-narrative videos in a bunch of different countries all over the world in different languages. So we can target, for instance, Albanian speakers in Belgium or Arabic speakers in Sweden, and get those videos across to those specific audiences. We can also hyper-target, meaning that we can target the videos specifically to people who have already been exposed to ISIS propaganda online. And we find that those people watch the videos for longer. So through our studying of these counter-narrative videos, we found that people really engage with them, especially with shorter 1-minute videos. They watch, about 40% of people who watch for 15 seconds go on to watch the whole thing, which is quite high from a marketing perspective. And we also find that people engage emotionally. So they comment on the topic and they express empathy toward the speaker. Sometimes they express anger toward the speaker. Sometimes they talk about conspiracy theories, but they always show they've had their interest piqued and they're interested in what we have to say. So as I mentioned before, then you need a direct action after that, because that's what the terrorists do. They give you the propaganda and then they tell you, here's what you can do next. And so we give this landing page view of therealjihad.org, which we have in English, Albanian, and Arabic. And recent campaigns in the Middle East and North Africa led to about 500,000 clicks to that link. So people want to see it, they want to learn more, they want to have access to resources. So that's important for us to know as well, that people want to know more. They don't want to just ignore the counter message. When they hear it and they believe it, they are interested in engaging, they're interested in hearing about new resources. So our next thing that we're working on is going into Instagram, which a lot of younger people are using, and we've talked a lot about, the terrorists are focusing on reaching vulnerable young people, and young people are moving off of Facebook and onto Instagram. And on Instagram, there is a lot of sympathy for this militant jihadist sentiment, and it's being used for propaganda. So that's also important to know that we can, that we should be fighting it on all platforms and fighting it in a way that's effective. We found that 1-minute videos on Instagram are still too long. People don't have the attention span. So can we do 15 seconds? Can we do a photo? But we need to be fighting. There are, accounts that are purportedly run by women who are in Camp Al-Hol in Syria. So they're posting about their lives, they're posting about how they're being oppressed. And so ISIS takes that and uses it as propaganda. So what we need to be doing on all platforms is fighting that directly, using these emotional, credible counter narratives that really recognize what people are going through and don't just tell them, you're wrong and that's it. And I'm told that we have a video example of it. So I'm happy to turn it over to whoever's going to show that video. And thank you all very much.
Do we have the video? Can we show the video? Aditya?
Yes, we are showing it. I would request everyone to kindly mute their mics, please.
Yeah.
They are getting oppressed, killed, raped, murdered. The brothers and the sisters in Syria. I gave up my friends. All my women friends, what I had, I stopped the contact. I gave this all up in exchange for something bigger, for something stronger. At the beginning, I was so happy to be there with the heroes of Islam. But sometimes I heard stories of ISIS raping women, torturing other people of brutal ways, burning people alive, drowning them in whose many horrible stories. They aren't these heroes, what I'm thinking about.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Obviously, there was a bit of a lag there, but you can see how he takes you through that whole journey, that it's not just alternative messaging telling you why he shouldn't have left in the first place. It's not logical arguments necessarily. He's telling you about the emotions he felt before, during, and after, and addressing the real reasons why he joined, and also addressing why he was wrong. And that's really important, and that is really meaningful to people who watch them.
Professor
Yeah, okay,
Darko,
you can hear me now. Sorry. I'd like to go over to Professor Darko. You're joining us. Finally, we get to see you. Professor Darko, do jump right in on your take on global terrorism in the name of Islam that's been unleashed. We heard our guests speak, our panelists saying this is largely a political tool, and innocent boys, men, women are pawns to it, to this political agenda. But is there something that the community and community leaders can do to strengthen the spirit of Islam and deter those entering terrorism for whatever benefits or perks?
First of all, I hope finally you hear me. Is it line okay now? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Good. First of all, I would like to thank organizers and all colleagues participating to this wonderful webinar. And I want to say hello from Europe, hello from Serbia. And for all professionals from the field of security, I am deeply surprised that most of our colleagues around the world, they don't know what is exactly science of security. They don't know the methods of the science of security. And more likely, they don't know parameters that something is wrong on one territory. I'm deeply surprised that our colleagues from France, from Germany, from Austria, and other places ignore for the years warning coming from Israel, coming from Serbia, coming from different places, that this global terrorist network will finish finally in heart of the Europe. From Abu Musa al-Zarqawi, who died 2004, he announced that this kind of the arrow of the global jihad will hit European heart directly. And let me go with you through important points. When you analyze something on one territory, you need to have some kind of indicators, what we call. Number one, if we watch one territory, we want to know whether there is presence and activities of terrorists, single or multiple. Number two, we would like to analyze whether there is activities or some kind of the presence of terrorist organization. Number three, presence and activities of so-called humanitarian or NGO organization harboring and giving logistics to terrorism and financing terrorism. Number four, if there is a presence and activities of so-called state or states sponsoring terrorism. And number five, what is most important, is there presence of using or misusing of religion as a motive for any kind act of violence, including terrorism. Then we come to the field of Islam as a great religion. And I want to say that everything what I'm going to say here is nothing against Islam as a big world religion, but we are dealing with all those jihadists that they are using, I don't know, or misusing Islam as a motive for a terrorist attack. What was really touchy and what is really something that we are, let's say, scared of, up to date, we don't have any imams of France, of Austria, accusing or, let's say, saying that it is wrong what these jihadists did. So which kind of the message they are dispatching to us. Most of the Wahhabi in Europe, all Wahhabi are not terrorists, but the problem is that almost all, 100%, not almost all, but 100% of terrorists are coming from Wahhabi movement. For the years, we warn Austrian, particularly Austrian and French colleagues, that there is a wide network in their country, and Vienna become the center of the global jihadi movement since 1980s. It was very clear that with organization TWRA, with most, let's say, jihadists that they fundraise and organize, Bin Laden and Al-Qaeda networks, they have a strong presence in heart of the Europe, exactly in Vienna. So Austrian authorities, they ignore for the years presence of jihadists, and their citizens pay high price. In Bosnia, in Kosovo, during the World War II, there was a 2 SS Muslim brigade, one in Bosnia, it was called SS Hanjar Division, actually Sanjak Division, and in Kosovo, SS Hanjar Division. In current war of 90s, in Kosovo, there was a jihadi unit called Abu Bakr Siddiq. In Bosnia, well-known unit of unit with the name El Mujahid unit. Right now, we are talking, there is a brigade of Albanians from Kosovo and Macedonia fighting as an independent brigade at El Nusra Foundation. But I will give you one more perspective. Why jihadists are terrorists? Because they are a propaganda, there is, let's say, they are widespreading political Islam, and widespreading political Islam, they are fighting for political Islam by terrorism and guerrilla and other means and ways of violence. So it is very necessary, at least right now, to open dialogue with the Muslim community and to understand better, because most of our mistakes are actually committed because we don't know each other. So I don't know Arabic, and I think most of you doesn't know Arabic. And we have to understand whether Islam is used or misused as a motivation. As we clearly know, for every terrorist attack in the world, it should be fulfill at least 2 components. One component is operational capability. That means how access to explosives and other tools like weapons, etc., etc. And number 2, which is most important, is motive or motivations to do attack. As we understand, all of these jihadi attack motives come from Islam. So something is very wrong. I am not expert for Islam. My colleagues from Serbia, they are dealing with political Islam and policy of religion. And maybe they can explain us much better more than that. I am security expert, and for me, it is very interesting to understand how religion, any religion, Christianity or Buddhism, whatever, it's used or misused for terrorist purpose. I would like to say thanks again for organizing this wonderful event, and I want to say hello to all participants.
Right. Thank you very much, Professor Darko, for joining us. But what you did say is something that a sentiment that echoes globally, that many of the Islamic clerics don't come out and speak and condemn as strongly as they should be. So is there something wrong? What is it that they're hesitating to speak out against? And that's what we time and again have been asking. I'd like to ask Zafar Sureshwala. Zafar, you did mention how it's how it's now enough that we've condemned it. It's now time to act. So when we say act, how do we act? Do you think clerics, see, you and I talking about it as much as we would probably talk about it, we would be branded as anti-Islam or a non-Muslim or someone who does not believe in Islam, which is why they're talking so openly and condemning the religion. Maybe it's about time that clerics come out and speak up against this, because that would have a bigger impact and a bigger effect, considering they're looked at as ardent followers and those propagating the religion itself. And how could that happen? How could you really say, starting with India itself and even globally, how can clerics come out and be more vocal about it? Why do they keep silent? What is wrong there?
Is it a question for me?
No.
If you want, you can go ahead if you have something to say. I was actually, the question there was, I don't think we have him right here. Zafar Sureshwala is not there, is he?
I'm there.
Yeah, go on, Mr. Zafar. That
I'm
was
there.
for you. Yeah. You said, like how Professor Darko says there's something wrong with Islam, and I don't know what it is because I'm not Islamic. So what is it that is wrong with Islam? And this is a glaring sentiment. People often say that why don't Muslims, especially clerics, speak up and condemn it vehemently? Why are clerics silent? Are they also somehow gaining out of this? Maybe in whatever way, to madrasas or in any way, any sort of benefit, monetary benefit or any other benefit, position or something.
Yeah.
I'm not making a blanket statement, but I'm saying those in power can speak up. Why don't they?
Yeah. Nabila, there is no problem with Islam. In fact, which I said earlier, but I'll elaborate now. There are 6 or 7 verses, and that also of 2 surahs, of Surah Tawbah and Surah Anfal. I mean, there are, the chapters. These 2 chapters, and there are 7 verses, which people just pick up every time and again. Now, unfortunately, these verses, and Quran, to understand Quran, you cannot just lift directly. Every verse of Quran, as we say in Arabic, Shan-e-Nuzul, means how it was revealed, why this surah or a verse was revealed, and what was the context it was revealed. So these 6 or 7 verses which people have been quoting or misquoting or misusing, they had a particular context. These were revealed when there was persecution to the Muslims and they were at war.
But Mr. Zafar, we've heard enough of this, right? That's the problem. We've heard this time and again for eons. Now how can you change it for more effective management of that?
That's what I'm coming to. Now it is not anybody else's duty. It is the duty of we the Muslims. Yes. And particularly the Islamic scholars. They need to use this at the pulpit. I mean, every Friday you have an audience. Every Friday you need to come out and condemn and give the exact context. That's what has to be done. I mean, these 6 or 7 verses get abrogated immediately when the Prophet entered Makkah. When he entered Makkah as a victor. Now you understand, any victorious army around the world, if you take in history, when they enter after persecution of 13 years, there is plunder, there is rape, and here the Prophet is entering and he said, forgiveness for everybody. So all these verses, 6 or 7, were abrogated the moment Prophet entered Makkah. And what was the behavior? The fundamental behavior was forgiveness. Forgiveness and compassion. So I think now it is the duty of the Islamic clerics to use the pulpit on Friday. I mean, there are millions of, pulpits available to them, and they need to take it up, because now condemning by me or Nabila, by you or a few people in this such conferences will not work. Already, I'm telling you, there is a section within the Muslim community which is not on Twitter or which is not on Facebook. They have already started this exercise, and I'm very happy they are doing it. But it needs to be done more effectively, and it needs to be done continuously.
Absolutely, it needs to echo. The sentiment needs to echo. But Mali, I'd like to ask you a question here. Since again you've surveyed quite a bit and understood what the behavior of young minds is, I'd like to ask you. It's not just about the vulnerable or the uneducated, someone looking for perks who is getting into this. We see people who are so intelligent, educated, having everything in life, suddenly switching. I don't know what that is. It's some sort of psychosis. I have no idea what that is. I can't explain. It's of course a handful of cases. Those who are thoroughly educated, who are passed out of the best colleges, who worked with the best firms, who have enough money and more, who switch to this kind of terror in the name of Islam. And this is what we see. The recent attacks in the churches in Sri Lanka. The men behind it were from very affluent political connections, yes, but very affluent industrial families. They had enough money, great education, very intellectual people, and they have friends who are secular. They're hanging out, hobnobbing with people who are secular and who have a sensible mind, but yet they somehow take up to that extremism. I don't know how to justify that, and how would anybody justify it?
Well, there are two kind of issues here. First, statistically, terrorists are less likely to be mentally ill, to have a diagnosed psychological disorder than the general population. So
is it proven?
Like statistically based on math, obviously, you can't say we've asked every single person and tested every single person who's ever been a terrorist, but it's unlikely generally for a terrorist to have a psychological disorder in, maybe the rarest of cases. But I think it's also wrong to conflate vulnerability with poverty, because you can be vulnerable and highly educated. You can be vulnerable and wealthy. We have needs that go so far beyond our basic needs for education, for food. We need to feel like we belong. We need to feel accepted. We need to feel like we have a purpose in life. We need to feel like we have significance, that we mean something. And if you don't feel that, and you can be wealthy, you can be well educated and not feel that, and somebody can come along and say, here's a way where you can be really significant, where you can be a hero, where you can be a protector, where you can do something in the name of God, that's a very powerful motivator regardless of your economic or your social status.
And you think that's where you need a psychological intervention, because that's probably not normal behavior. If you're looking at things larger than life, then there is something psychological there.
Well, there's a way to be convinced, and lots of us find other ways to feel significant. The need is present in all of us. And so what is really needed, I think, personally, in most cases, and sure, I think everyone can benefit from psychological help, certainly. But what we also need is options and ways for people to feel like they have meaning, ways for people to feel like they have purpose, community leaders, religious leaders, parents, teachers, to be really guiding people and showing them how they can feel significant, how they can make a difference, how if they see something very upsetting, if they see Syrian civilians being gassed, for instance, what can they do instead? Because they don't want to just sit idly by. They need some way to feel like they have meaning and that they can make a difference. And if no one else is coming along to give them an option, and a terrorist is, then, depending on this confluence of situations and of needs, then that might seem like a reasonable option.
Oh, well, so you're saying it comes down to parenting, to teaching, and again, education. The basic structure of a community. I think that's what I get. Yeah. I'd like to ask if we have our former Raw Chief, Sanjeev Tripathi, with us. I hear you have something to say, Mr. Tripathi.
Yeah. Thank you, Nabila. I will just make 4 short statements and will seek the comments of various panelists on that.
Right.
Number one, this radical Islamic extremism cannot be countered through military or security actions alone. It has to be countered at the ideological level as well, both in the social media as well as on the ground. Number two, since it is a religion-based ideology, it has to be countered within the religion, and any outside interference could be counterproductive. Number three, Jafar Saab has just said, and Christine Saib had also said earlier, that there are certain specific verses of Holy Quran which these extremist elements generally quote, and they should not be seen in isolation. So shouldn't the Islamic theologists or clerics sit together and distinguish between constitutive and contextual verses of Holy Quran? And number 4, what are your views on the doctrine of abrogation as propagated by extremist elements? According to this doctrine, the subsequent Medina verses supersede the earlier Makkah verses. Well, I will conclude by urging that let us not play down or justify the problem by attributing it solely to political factors. Yes, political factors are certainly work as catalysts, but the problem is very much there and it must be tackled. Thank you.
Right. Mr. Tripathi, thank you very much. I think those are the questions very rightly framed. That's what I always ask. People within the religion itself hesitate to frame such questions and ask such questions because there's a lot of there's fear that of backlash within the community itself, and that's what we see often. I'd like to go to Shaida Mohammad Abdali. So, are you with us?
Nabila, can I come just reply to Mr. Tripathi in just few seconds, please?
Yes, go on.
Tripathi Saab, Quran, there is one more conjunction which is very important. It is called Rasikh and Mansukh. Means certain ayats of Quran have been abrogated. Now, unfortunately, which I mentioned, the 6-7 verses of Quran, there has been clear distinction made by several Islamic scholars about that. But unfortunately, people pick up those verses directly and translate. But in the commentary of these verses, the very renowned Islamic scholar of Pakistan, Mufti Shafi Usmani, who died about maybe 40 years, who was originally from Deoband, he has made very clear distinction about this. Dr. Israr Ahmad, if you know, he died in 2010 and his videos are very much prevalent. He has dealt these 7 verses very clearly. But unfortunately, what's happening, people hide the real thing. So that's what I'm coming to, that people now, Islamic scholars now need to come out and say exactly that these surahs have been abrogated. I mean, Quran has to be read in context. So now the time, and already people have done work on it, but unfortunately it is hidden. We need to bring that out. That's what my limited point here.
Right. Now, but whose fault or responsibility it is that this is hidden? Whose fault or responsibility it is that it is not highlighted? If it's not heard, you shout. If you're going to push and shout, people will hear it. And that's what I think it's time for us to do now. Considering the number of cases of terror that's unleashed, it's scary to say the least. And what happens is, at the end of it, it's the innocent, genuine Muslims, like all of us, you and I, who are actually bearing the brunt of this kind of extremism. Even though we are secular, it's the extremists who show the rest of the community in bad light. So shout if need be, but it's about time that your voice should be heard.
I'll just add, yes, it is our fault. We have not come out. For example, one more thing, which a false hadith is being floated.
True.
And it is called Ghazwa-e Hind. Now, there is nothing like Ghazwa-e Hind. It is a false narration, but it is being used by the ISIS of the world. So, yes, it is our fault that we kept quiet when it was being propagated.
True.
So I think the time to keep quiet is finished. We need to come out. And several false hadiths attributed to the Prophet are flooded in the market. So I think we need to confront them and we cannot keep quiet. It is our fault.
Right. I'll go to Shaida Mohammad Abdali there on that.
Yes, please.
Shaida, can you hear me? Yeah, go on, Shaida, your take on that. You heard what Mr. Tripathi said, a couple of questions that he very strategically pointed out, which I think Islam clerics itself in the community would worry to discuss something as this, because it could possibly lead to backlash.
You see, I heard, almost each panelist speaking of Muslim scholars speaking out, raising voices against what is being, done to Islam and the people of this region. In our context in Afghanistan, the people who speak out, including the ulama, they're being targeted on daily basis. The tribal chiefs who speak out against those who are using Islam as a tool for political purposes are being targeted. We have lost hundreds of religious ulama. So this is the nature of terrorism. I think many ulamas would like to speak out, but are we there to protect them against these terrorists who are everywhere, especially in areas like in our part of the world? I mean, Afghanistan is not safe for an ulama, for the mullah to speak out without the proper protection.
True.
This does not mean that Muslims or the ulama do not want to speak out. It is their fault. I think the solution lies not in the ulamas much as compared to the state politics in our part of the region, which are doing everything to suppress the voices raised against the use of terrorism, and they continue to do what they've been doing to advance their political agenda. Therefore, it is time that the countries of this region, states who are not supporting, the vast majority of countries in this region, they are against terrorism, and there are very few actors and very few state actors who are using still religion as a tool. Therefore, the majority has to come together and find a solution in the state structures, not in the social fabric that we're speaking of, because they are vulnerable and they're being targeted and they're being exploited.
Right.
The people who are poor, they are exploited and they're hired and they're recruited to be used as a powder for terrorism. Therefore, the main problem is in the politics of this region particularly, and of course elsewhere beyond this region who are using terrorism as a tool. Unfortunately, in Afghanistan, we've been speaking of peace for the last 3 years, particularly in a much stronger manner. But the more we speak of peace, the more violence increases. This means there is still no intention, political, particularly in our region, who would like to make peace with us.
Absolutely. Right. Thank you very much. I'm going to quickly, actually, Noor wanted to say a word. He wanted to intervene. Noor, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, thank you, Nabila. Just a minute. Yes, I've listened to Zafar Sadi's speech and whatever he said, I completely agree with him. And Mr. Anita.
Sir, can you be a bit louder, please?
Hello,
yeah,
can you hear me?
Your audio. Yeah, we can hear you now. Go on.
Can you hear me now? Yes. I just listened to what Mr. Zafar Sadi's explained about difference between Quran verses, how it was implemented. Completely agree with that. Mr. Nita, he presented some recommendations, and I completely endorse the recommendations. However, Shahid Mahmood is saying right, but however, I just put my point of view. Like when the people says it's be wrongly linked with Islam, right? I objection here. Who linked with Islam? Western governments, the government of India, or non-Muslims, or Muslim themselves, the Islamists. Actually, the Islamists link terrorism with Islam, not them. Whatever you are using the manipulate the verses of Quran, and you can commit an act of terrorism, and you can say Allahu Akbar. So if the people say that your religion is there, so who is associating religion with the terrorism? Definitely we Muslims, our Islamists, they are the people who are link terrorism with Islam. Now this is what we call faith-based religion. Terrorism. This is a faith-based terrorism that you you take the name of the religion and you kill the people. Now, like Brother Nita, he said recommendations. One of the recommendations, yes, this is a problem within Islam. then we Muslims, like Zafar Saab said, we Muslims need to come out, and you have to de-radicalize ideology. We have to counter the ideology and their narratives through the theology of Islam. Because those people who are out of the bubble, out of the Islam, like a non-Muslim, or they people know the less about Arabic or the narrative, the Islamists like Anjum Chaudhry or Abu Bakr Baghdadi or Qutb's narratives or Osama bin Laden or Hafiz Saeed. That's people use the narrative Al-Wala wal-Bara, Hakmiya, Sharia, Taghut, these things, Khawarij, Kharjiya. These people, these narratives need to be countered through the Islamic way, through the using the proper way of the Quran and Hadith. Without them, we can't counter, because this is
in a proper way. What do you mean? Like, what exactly do you mean? How
Al-Wala wal-Bara,
together?
like, yes, we have to use, because these are the narratives used by the Islamists. Now people need to understand what is a Muslims, what is a Islamist. We can't say Islamic terrorism, because in the UK, our government security services, police departments, they don't use the word Islamic terrorism. They use Islamist terrorism. This is a two different narrative. Islamic we use like in a positive way, Islamic culture, Islamic dresses, or Islamic people, Islamic institutions. Islamist is a negative how the Islam has been used in a political way. So this is why we have to come out in front of you, have to and tell the people how to counter these narratives, because Islamists, they are very expert, the clerics. They know how to manipulate verses, how to use them to manipulate and lure the youngsters. So if we are not in the capable of to counter their narratives, it's our fault, not other people. Like the Macron says, French president a few weeks ago, after these innocent people's killings, he said Islam is in a crisis, and all the world has started specifically in Indian Muslims or Pakistani, my countries, Muslim, Bangladesh, South India. They started, Macron is a blasphemous, or Macron's Islam is crisis. Actually, if you look at yes, Islam is in crisis. Crisis by who? Crisis by the Islamists, because they have hijacked our religion. They have hijacked our Quran and our Hadith to manipulate and use in a way of to achieve the political goals. So if the George Bush said that we are in a war with Islamism, so we need to understand that he didn't say that Islam, we are war with Islam. We have a war with Islamism, which is a political Islam, nothing to do with Islam as a religion, which we are billions of peaceful Muslims are practicing and following the Islam in Western countries or in India.
Noor, you're basically saying that just laying a lot of emphasis on religious leaders only to tackle this problem of extremism is not the solution. It's for progressive Muslims to come together in large numbers, along with clerics, great, but come in larger numbers and work on it. Have a dialogue first.
Exactly. Yes, come out, have a dialogue, talk to them, sit with them. And these Islamist people, talk to them. Why they break up their ideology, break up their narratives one by one. Because they people are youngsters, they don't know.
As much as others or non-Muslims fear Islamist terrorists or Islamist extremist groups, Muslims themselves fear them also. To actually connect with them and have a conversation with them is scary, nonetheless, for anyone.
This is why I have written so many articles, journals, and books, that I'm continually saying Muslims, don't be defensive. Come out, because if a bunch of the people, they can hijack your religion, and you are in the millions and billions, and if you keep quiet or scared, then definitely they will come over and they will use your religion.
By association. That's the matter of fact. All right, a quick word from Dr. Anne. Dr. Anne, you're with us. I'm going to take your last word. Considering it's the pandemic here, and this has certainly disrupted educational systems and pushed a lot of low-income countries, many families into poverty. At a time like this, do you see vulnerable youngsters being pushed into faith-based extremism, and how can we really control it now?
Well, I was just going to say that we keep asking for religious scholars to give the answers to terrorism, but terrorism is by definition political violence. And it exists because people believe there's grievances. So when you asked how could these high educated people in Sri Lanka get sucked into this, we saw the same thing in Bangladesh, the highly educated, well-off people. And it's because of grievances. And a lot of times when you see
Dr. Ann, your video is frozen.
Sorry, I'll speak from this computer. I've had problems with my computer. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Go on. Go on.
Can you hear me
Doctor.
now?
We can hear you.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Go on, Doctor.
What I was trying to say is that the things that we see are young people in college, well-off people, oftentimes are watching the grievances around the world and they're getting really angry. And if people that manipulate religion tell them that they have answers, then they will go for it. And we can't just ask religious scholars to make the answers to political grievances. In fact, we heard from the ambassador that religious scholars are afraid to speak about these grievances. And it's got to be the politicians, it's got to be the society that addresses the real grievances that are fueling this. And then people won't look to their religion for answers to politics because they'll get the answers from government.
So I think, a lot of the responsibility lies on the government on the way they address an issue of religion or even terror. I think, go on.
Not just religion, but the real things that are going on in society. Can you get a job? Are you treated correctly? Is your neighborhood under attack by hoodlums, by people that attack you because of your religion? Can you wear a niqab without getting spit at? These are issues all around the world. Do you get tortured for speaking up? These are the things, and they're political in nature, and they're true grievances that drive people to look for answers in religion, and then manipulators have power. But I think we go at it backwards if we ask religious scholars to step in and address political problems. That's not their job.
Sure. All right, Dr. Ann, thank you very much. It was really insightful. Our guests there giving us all that, the perspectives and views on global terror, extremism. Shaida Mohammed, do you want to give a last word as we wrap up today, our session?
Well, thank you very much. I think this was very rich introduction. You see, I would like to speak for my country, for a country that has much impact when it comes to terrorism for the region and the globe. And you know of the 9/11, which was triggered, what was going on in Afghanistan, and then the world intervention. Today, unfortunately, the world is tired of what is going on in Afghanistan, not because the world didn't do what it should have done, but because there was no sincerity, in the fight against terrorism from our region. Today, we are at a crossroad. We either have to fix our problem in our region, else the world will have to leave this region and the whole problem will be left for this region. Today, as you know, Afghanistan is pursuing peace vigorously, and we have a Doha process where the Afghan government, along with the political leadership of Afghanistan, is engaging the Taliban, and the US has done a peace deal with the Taliban. So my point is that Afghanistan can be a turning point when it comes to tackling terrorism, because Afghanistan has suffered, and because of Afghanistan, the world has suffered. And we should not go back to another suffering of another 9/11, God forbid, in the US or elsewhere in the world. So solution of terrorism lies globally, but Afghanistan is a case in point. If we tackle terrorism in the peace process that we are engaging right now, we will be able to start from somewhere and move on and tackle terrorism in the region and globally. So I have a good news that we have made progress, but that progress is not enough when it comes to the fatigue among the world community after 20 years of fighting in Afghanistan, more than 42 countries. But the real responsibility lies in this region, in South Asia and Central Asia, where terrorist networks have a symbiotic relationship and supported by state structure. So as I echo or the previous speaker, that the solution doesn't lie in the individuals or the ulamas. They are vulnerable to and they are victims of what is going on and what the states are doing in this part of the region. We hope that those who are supporting terrorism will give up on this nefarious idea of using terrorism as a tool for political agendas or economic agendas. I think ultimately everyone will suffer. Today, we may be suffering as a country, and some other country in the neighborhood will be suffering, but ultimately we all will suffer. So we hope that the countries of this region will ultimately decide that this is not the way to run the state, and we have to have a civilized relationship among our countries in the region. So we are hoping that the Doha process will be a success, so that we don't see another 9/11 and another subsequent attacks. Thank you.
Absolutely. Today is the 12th year after 26/11, the attacks in India, and I think this is the right time, the occasion, also the Constitution Day, the 71st Constitution Day, the country observes. At a time like this, that we're having a dialogue like this seems to be processed in the right direction. Thank you very much, Shahidam Abdali, also Dr. Anne, Noor, Molly. Fantastic perspectives coming from each one of you. It's a delight to be part of it, and I did shed my inhibitions and a lot of questions I personally had in my mind, even when I have to debate on television as well, and a lot of questions that are always unanswered, and I also feel responsible. Why can't I ask? Why can't I speak up? And if you do, then what's the reaction you get from the community members itself? So this has really cleared a lot of air and given me some perspective as well personally. So thank you very much for allowing me to moderate this. Thank you. Thank you, Aditya Chiku, for being fantastic in scheduling this. Over to you.
Thank you, respected speakers. And thank you, Nabila ma'am, once again. We were undoubtedly hooked to this session. At least I could feel myself getting engrossed as the dynamics, they reached very high and totally beyond any explanation. Thank you so much. And finally, we have reached the end of our day-long International Counterterrorism Conference. My heartiest gratitude to all the speakers, dignitaries, special guests who have joined us today. I'm sure all of us are taking so much with us today. It has been very informative and thought-provoking throughout. Essentially, we will end the conference, but it does not mean the experience will come to end. It will always stay with us. Also, special thanks to our audience for pulling up with us for the entire day. Last but not the least, the person I cannot afford to miss, without whom nothing would have been ever possible, Sir Aditya Tikku. Sir, we are very grateful to you for giving us this grand of an opportunity. And I also request everyone to kindly connect with GCTC over social media. The links are available in the comment box. And if anyone wants to say anything, please, you can go for it.
In the end, I would just say this one thing, because it is about Islamic terrorism. We need to isolate the Islamist from the Islam. This distinction needs to be brought out very clearly. That's my word. And again, I'll repeat, we need to use every single platform, and we can start, and we'll have to go to the clerics, and I will request this to Mr. Noor also, that we go to our clerics and tell them to use that opportunity of 20 minutes, which they have every Friday from the pulpit, and spread the word.
Thank you so much, sir. And
I would also say,
yes,
just
anybody?
Everyone a happy Thanksgiving from the US, because it's our Thanksgiving today.
Oh, that's amazing. Wish you the same, Dr.
Thank you
Ann.
so much, ma'am.
I just want to say
Yes,
that
so
I just want to say, thanks every day to all of you and the best wishes from Athens, Greece. And it was great and productive, with the national conference. I was very happy to see all of you and I wish you the best. Stay safe from coronavirus from Athens, Greece.
Thank you very much.
thank you very much, sir. So finally, there we go. We look forward to many such conferences in the coming days. This is Aprajita Sarkar, along with my other hosts, signing off for the day. Thank you, everybody.